A woman walked into Judge Judy's courtroom with a smirk on her face, convinced she could outsmart the system. 30 seconds later, she made a statement so shocking, so unbelievably arrogant that it stopped everyone cold. What she said next didn't just cost her the case. It exposed her in a way that millions of people would never forget. But here's what makes this story truly jaw-dropping. She actually believed the rules didn't apply to her. And Judge Judy? She was about to teach her the most expensive lesson of her life. Before we dive into this incredible case, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I love seeing where my viewers are around the world. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss more unbelievable cases like this one. Now sit back, relax, and enjoy the video. The fluorescent lights of the Los Angeles courtroom hummed softly, casting a clinical glow over the polished wooden benches and the American flag standing sentinel in the corner. Judge Judy Sheindlin sat behind her elevated bench, her sharp eyes scanning the docket in front of her with the precision of a seasoned prosecutor. At 81, she was a force of nature, her silver hair perfectly styled, her black robe immaculate, and her expression one of controlled authority. This wasn't just a courtroom, it was her domain. And in her domain there were rules, sacred, unbreakable rules about truth, respect, and accountability. The bailiff stood near the door, his posture rigid, his face unreadable. The gallery was filled with spectators, some there to support the parties involved, others simply curious onlookers drawn by the promise of drama. The air carried a peculiar tension, the kind that settles over a room when everyone knows something significant is about to unfold. Cameras positioned strategically around the courtroom captured every angle, every expression, every movement. This wasn't just justice. This was justice with an audience. On one side of the room stood the plaintiff, a middle-aged man named Robert Chen. His hands were clasped in front of him, his shoulders slightly hunched as if carrying the weight of frustration and betrayal. He wore a simple button-down shirt and slacks, nothing flashy, nothing pretentious, just a man who wanted what he was owed. His eyes were tired but determined, the kind of tired that comes from months of trying to resolve something that should have been simple. He had documents tucked under his arm, receipts, text messages, emails, a paper trail that told a story he was desperate to share. And then there was Karen. She stood on the opposite side, and everything about her screamed defiance. Karen Mitchell was in her late 40s, dressed in a crisp white blazer over a pastel blouse, her blonde hair styled in loose waves that framed a face set in permanent irritation. Her arms were crossed, her weight shifted to one hip, and her lips were pressed into a thin line that suggested she found this entire proceeding beneath her. She didn't look nervous. She didn't look apologetic. She looked annoyed, as if being summoned to court was an inconvenience she hadn't deserved. Her eyes darted around the room with a mix of boredom and barely concealed contempt. She checked her phone once, scrolling casually before the bailiff shot her a look that made her slide it back into her purse with an exaggerated sigh. Judge Judy glanced up from her notes, her gaze landing on Karen with the intensity of a hawk-spotting movement in tall grass. She had seen thousands of people stand where Karen stood. Some were genuinely wronged. Some were confused. Some were remorseful. And some, like Karen, walked in thinking they were cleverer than everyone else in the room. Judge Judy could always tell the difference. It was in the posture, the micro-expressions, the way they held themselves. Karen wasn't here to make things right. She was here because she had to be, and that was her first mistake. This is case number 4721, Chen versus Mitchell. Judge Judy began, her voice clear and commanding, cutting through the low murmur of the gallery. Mr. Chen is suing Ms. Mitchell for $4,200, the cost of repairs to his vehicle after an accident, plus additional expenses for a rental car. She paused, letting the details settle. Ms. Mitchell claims she doesn't owe him a dime. Her eyes locked onto Karen. Is that correct, Ms. Mitchell? Karen uncrossed her arms, tilting her head slightly as if the question itself was ridiculous. That's correct, Your Honor, she said, her tone dripping with casual dismissiveness. This whole thing is blown way out of proportion. Judge Judy's pen tapped once against her notepad. Just once, but it was enough. That single tap was a warning, a signal to anyone paying attention that the judge had already started taking notes. Not just on the facts, but on the attitude. Robert shifted his weight, his jaw tightening. He had been waiting for this moment for months, and hearing Karen's flippant response reignited the frustration he'd been carrying. Judge Judy glanced at him briefly, a silent acknowledgement that she saw him, that she understood. Then her attention returned to Karen, steady and unblinking. Blown out of proportion, Judge Judy repeated, her voice flat. We'll see about that. She gestured to Robert. Mr. Chen, tell me what happened. What Karen didn't realize, what she couldn't possibly have understood as she stood there with her arms crossed and her attitude on full display, was that she had just walked into something far bigger than a small claims case. She had walked into a reckoning. And the woman sitting behind that bench? She had spent decades dismantling lies, exposing arrogance, and delivering justice to people who thought they could talk their way out of accountability. Karen thought this was just another annoying formality. Judge Judy knew it was about to become a masterclass. Before we dive into what happened next, and trust me, you're going to want to see every second of this, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications, because what Judge Judy does to Karen in the next few minutes is something you'll want to watch again and again. Don't miss it. Robert Chen cleared his throat, stepping forward slightly as all eyes in the courtroom turned to him. He wasn't a man comfortable with attention, that much was obvious. His hands trembled slightly as he unfolded a piece of paper, smoothing it against his thigh before looking up at Judge Judy. "Your Honor," he began, his voice steady but soft. "6 months ago, Ms. Mitchell ran a red light and hit my car, totaled the front end. I had witnesses, I had the police report, everything showed she was at fault." Judge Judy nodded, her fingers steepled in front of her. "And her insurance?" Robert's face tightened, the frustration bubbling just beneath the surface. "That's the problem, Your Honor. She gave me false insurance information. The policy number she wrote down? It didn't exist. When I tried to follow up, the company had no record of her. I've been trying to get her to pay for 6 months. 6 months of phone calls, texts, emails. She kept making excuses, saying she'd pay me next week, then the week after. Finally, I gave up and came here." Judge Judy's gaze shifted to Karen, who was now inspecting her nails as if the conversation happening 3 feet away from her was background noise. "Ms. Mitchell, is what Mr. Chen said true? Did you give him false insurance information?" Karen looked up slowly, her expression one of theatrical innocence. "I gave him the information I had, Your Honor. If it was wrong, that's not my fault. Maybe I copied it down wrong. It was a stressful situation." She shrugged, the gesture so casual it bordered on mocking. "And honestly, his car wasn't even that damaged. He's acting like I destroyed a brand new Mercedes. It was a 2008 Honda Civic." The courtroom fell silent. Robert's hands clenched into fists at his sides, his jaw working as he fought to keep his composure. Judge Judy leaned back in her chair, her eyes narrowing. "So your defense is that his car was old, so the damage doesn't matter?" "I'm just saying he's exaggerating," Karen replied, her tone light, almost sing-song. $4,000? For a dent and a broken headlight? Come on." Judge Judy picked up a photograph from the stack of evidence in front of her. She held it up, angling it so the cameras and the gallery could see. The image showed Robert's Honda Civic, its entire front end crumpled like an accordion. The hood buckled, the bumper hanging by a thread, shattered glass littering the asphalt. "This," Judge Judy said, her voice cold and sharp, "is a dent and a broken headlight?" Karen glanced at the photo, her expression flickering for just a moment before she recovered. "Well, I mean, it looks worse in pictures." Judge Judy set the photo down slowly, deliberately, her eyes never leaving Karen's face. "It looks worse in pictures," she repeated, her tone laced with disbelief. She leaned forward, resting her elbows on the bench. "Ms. Mitchell, do you think I was born yesterday?" Karen blinked, caught off guard. "I'm sorry?" "I asked," Judge Judy said, enunciating each word with surgical precision. "If you think I was born yesterday, because the way you're standing there telling me that this," she tapped the photograph, "is exaggerated? That takes a special kind of audacity." Karen's confident facade cracked for just a second, before she plastered on a tight smile. "Your Honor, I'm just trying to explain my side. Mr. Chen is making this sound worse than it was." Judge Judy held up a hand, silencing her. "Let me ask you something very simple. Were you driving the car that hit Mr. Chen's vehicle?" "Yes, but—" "Yes or no, Ms. Mitchell?" Karen's lips pressed together. "Yes. And did you run the red light?" "I don't think I did. The light was yellow when I entered the intersection." Judge Judy's eyebrows shot up. She reached for another document, her reading glasses perched on her nose. "The police report says 3 witnesses, including a traffic camera, confirmed the light was red for a full 2 seconds before you entered the intersection." She looked up. "So either 3 people and a camera are lying or you are. Which is it?" Karen shifted her weight, her arms crossing again defensively. "Maybe they didn't see it right. It all happened so fast." 3 witnesses and a camera didn't see it right," Judge Judy repeated, her voice dripping with skepticism. She turned to Robert. "Mr. Chen, do you have the police report with you?" Robert nodded quickly, pulling a folder from under his arm. He handed it to the bailiff, who passed it to Judge Judy. She flipped through it, her eyes scanning the typed paragraphs with the speed of someone who'd read thousands of similar documents. Officer Martinez arrived on scene at 3:47 p.m. Witness 1, Maria Gonzalez, stated she saw the defendant's vehicle, a silver Toyota Camry, run the red light at high speed. Witness 2, David Park, confirmed the same. Traffic camera footage corroborates. Judge Judy looked up. "Ms. Mitchell, did you even read this report?" "I glanced at it," Karen said dismissively. But those witnesses were probably friends of his or something. The gallery gasped. Robert's mouth fell open. Even the bailiff's eyebrows lifted slightly. Judge Judy removed her glasses slowly, setting them down on the bench. Friends of his? Maria Gonzalez was a 68-year-old woman walking her dog. David Park was a delivery driver. Neither of them had ever met Mr. Chen before that day. She leaned forward, her voice dropping to a dangerous calm. Are you suggesting they committed perjury to help a complete stranger? Karen realized she'd stepped in it. I'm not saying that, I don't know, maybe they were mistaken. Mistaken? 3 people. And a camera. Judge Judy's pen tapped twice this time. Let's move on. Mr. Chen, you said Ms. Mitchell gave you insurance information. Do you have proof of that? Robert nodded eagerly, pulling out his phone. I took a picture of the paper she gave me right there at the scene. He handed his phone to the bailiff. Judge Judy examined the screen, her expression darkening. She looked at Karen. This policy number doesn't exist. I called the insurance company myself before this hearing. They have no record of you ever being a customer. Karen's face flushed. That's impossible. I had insurance. Then why doesn't this number work? Maybe I wrote it down wrong in the moment. I was shaken up. Judge Judy's voice turned to ice. You were shaken up, but Mr. Chen, whose car you just destroyed, wasn't. Karen's face was reddening now, her composure slipping with each passing second. She uncrossed her arms, then crossed them again, shifting from foot to foot like a boxer trying to find an opening that didn't exist. Judge Judy wasn't giving her one. Ms. Mitchell, let me make sure I understand your story. You ran a yellow light, not a red one. Even though 3 witnesses and a camera say otherwise, you gave correct insurance information, but somehow the policy doesn't exist. And Mr. Chen's car, which looks like it went through a trash compactor, only has a dent and a broken headlight. Do I have that right? When you say it like that, it sounds bad. Karen protested, her voice rising slightly. It sounds bad because it is bad. Judge Judy shot back. Now let's talk about the 6 months after the accident. Mr. Chen says he tried repeatedly to contact you about payment. What's your response to that? Karen waved a hand dismissively. He texted me a few times, sure, but he was being unreasonable about the amount. I told him I'd pay him something, but not $4,000. That's ridiculous. Judge Judy picked up another document. Mr. Chen has provided a complete record of your text conversations. 63 messages over 6 months. In these messages, you promised payment 11 different times. 11 times you gave him a specific date, and 11 times you failed to pay. She looked up, her eyes boring into Karen. That's not being unreasonable. That's being lied to. Repeatedly. I had financial issues, Karen said quickly. I was going to pay him when I could. Then why did you tell him on March 15th that the check was in the mail? And on April 3rd that you'd pay him that Friday? And on May 20th that your insurance was handling it? Judge Judy's voice rose with each question. Were those lies, or were you just confused 11 separate times? Karen's mouth opened and closed. She looked around the courtroom as if searching for an exit, a lifeline, anything. The spectators watched in rapt silence. Robert stood perfectly still, his eyes locked on Karen, watching her squirm. This was the moment he'd been waiting for. 6 months of frustration, of being dismissed and disrespected, and finally, someone was holding her accountable. I was trying to figure things out, Karen said weakly. I didn't mean to mislead him. Judge Judy leaned back in her chair, her expression one of barely controlled disgust. Ms. Mitchell, I've been doing this for 28 years. I've seen every excuse, every deflection, every attempt to avoid responsibility. And you know what I've learned? Liars always have one thing in common. They can never keep their story straight. She paused, letting the words hang in the air. So I'm going to ask you one more time, and I want you to think very carefully before you answer. Did you or did you not give Mr. Chen false insurance information intentionally? The courtroom held its breath. Karen's eyes darted to the exit, to the cameras, to Robert, and finally back to Judge Judy. And then, in a moment of staggering arrogance that would be replayed millions of times, she shrugged. Look, I might have fudged some details, but it's not like I'm under oath or anything. The silence that followed was deafening. Judge Judy's face transformed. The controlled authority gave way to something far more dangerous. Pure, undiluted disbelief mixed with fury. Her mouth opened slightly, then closed. She blinked once, twice, as if she couldn't quite believe what she'd just heard. The pen in her hand stopped mid-tap, frozen in the air. The entire courtroom seemed to hold its breath. Every person leaning forward, waiting for the explosion they knew was coming. Excuse me? Judge Judy's voice was barely above a whisper, but it cut through the silence like a blade. What did you just say? Karen, still oblivious to the magnitude of her mistake, shrugged again. I just meant that I wasn't trying to lie. I was just... Stop talking. Judge Judy's hand shot up, palm out. Stop talking. She stood up from her chair, something she rarely did, and the movement sent a ripple of shock through the gallery. She leaned forward, Both hands planted on the bench, her eyes locked on Karen with an intensity that could melt steel. Did you just tell me that you're not under oath? Karen's face finally registered fear. Real fear. Her eyes widened and she took a half step back. I didn't mean... When you walked into this courtroom, Judge Judy continued, her voice rising with each word. You raised your right hand. Do you remember that? You raised your right hand and you swore to tell the truth, the whole truth and nothing but the truth. So help you God. Do you remember doing that? Karen nodded mutely, her face draining of color. That means you are under oath. Judge Judy's voice thundered through the courtroom. You have been under oath from the moment you walked through that door. Every word out of your mouth has been under oath. And you just admitted on the record that you've been lying. She pointed at Karen, her finger trembling with rage. Do you understand what perjury is, Ms. Mitchell? I wasn't trying to... Karen stammered, her previous confidence completely evaporated. Perjury is a crime. Judge Judy continued, not giving her an inch. It means lying under oath in a court proceeding. It can result in fines, jail time, and a permanent criminal record. And you just confessed to it on camera in front of witnesses because you were too arrogant to realize that rules apply to you. Karen's hands were shaking now. She looked like she might cry or faint or both. Your Honor, please, I didn't understand. You didn't understand. Judge Judy's laugh was sharp and bitter. You understood perfectly well. You understood when you gave Mr. Chen fake insurance information. You understood when you lied to him 11 times about payment. You understood when you walked in here and lied about the red light, about the damage, about everything. She sat back down slowly, deliberately, her eyes never leaving Karen's face. What you didn't understand is that actions have consequences, that you can't just smile and shrug your way out of responsibility. The bailiff shifted slightly, his hand moving closer to Karen as if expecting her to bolt. Robert stood frozen, his mouth slightly open, watching the systematic destruction of the woman who'd made his life miserable for 6 months. Judge Judy opened the folder in front of her, flipping through the pages with methodical precision. Each turn of a page felt like a nail being driven into Karen's coffin. The courtroom was so quiet you could hear the rustle of paper, the soft hum of the cameras, the barely audible breathing of dozens of spectators holding their collective breath. Karen stood motionless, her arms wrapped around herself now, no longer defensive but protective like a child bracing for punishment. Let me walk through what we have here, Judge Judy began, her voice returning to its calm, measured tone, which somehow felt more threatening than the yelling. We have a police report confirming you ran a red light. We have 3 independent witnesses. We have traffic camera footage. We have photographs showing extensive damage to Mr. Chen's vehicle. We have a fake insurance policy number that you claim was an accident, despite the fact that you clearly wrote it down carefully enough for Mr. Chen to photograph it. We have 63 text messages showing a pattern of deception and broken promises. And we have your own admission moments ago that you fudged some details because you thought you weren't under oath. She looked up, her gaze pinning Karen in place. Ms. Mitchell, in 28 years on this bench, I have seen some brazen displays of entitlement and dishonesty. But you've managed to distinguish yourself. Congratulations. Karen's lip quivered. Your Honor, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. Save it. Judge Judy cut her off with a wave of her hand. I don't want your apology. Apologies are for people who are genuinely remorseful. You're not remorseful. You're just sorry you got caught. She picked up her pen, making a note on her pad. Here's what's going to happen. Judgment for the plaintiff, Mr. Chen, in the amount of $4,200 for vehicle repairs and rental car expenses. Robert exhaled, his shoulders sagging with relief. 6 months of fighting, 6 months of being dismissed and lied to, and finally, vindication. But Judge Judy wasn't finished. Additionally, she continued, her voice hardening, I'm adding another $800 in court costs, which you will also pay. That brings your total to $5,000. And let me be crystal clear, Ms. Mitchell, you will pay this. Not next week, not next month, not when it's convenient for you. The show will ensure Mr. Chen receives his money, and then we will come after you for reimbursement. If you fail to pay, we will pursue every legal avenue available, including wage garnishment and liens against any property you own. Karen's face crumpled. $5,000. I don't have that kind of money. Judge Judy's expression didn't change. Then you shouldn't have lied, cheated, and committed perjury in my courtroom. You made your choices. Now you live with them. She raised her gavel. We're done here. Judgment for the plaintiff. Get out of my courtroom. The gavel came down with a sharp crack that echoed like a gunshot. Karen stood frozen for a moment, stunned, before the bailiff gestured toward the exit. She walked toward the door, her heels clicking against the floor, each step a walk of shame past dozens of eyes watching her defeat. Robert Chen walked out of that courtroom with more than just a judgment in his favor. He walked out with his dignity restored, with proof that persistence and truth still matter in a world that sometimes feels designed to reward those who lie the loudest. For 6 months, he'd been gaslit, dismissed, and disrespected by someone who believed rules were suggestions for other people. And in less than 15 minutes, Judge Judy had dismantled that illusion completely. For those watching this story unfold, the lesson is devastatingly clear. Karen's downfall wasn't just about a car accident or unpaid damages. It was about something far more dangerous, the belief that accountability is optional. She walked into that courtroom thinking she could charm, deflect, and manipulate her way out of consequences. She thought that if she just acted confident enough, annoyed enough, inconvenienced enough, she could rewrite reality to suit her narrative. But here's the truth that Karen learned the hard way. Integrity isn't situational. You don't get to pick and choose when honesty matters. The oath you take in a courtroom isn't a formality. It's a sacred promise that truth will be your currency, and when you treat that promise like it's negotiable, you don't just lose the case. You lose something far more valuable. Your credibility, your character, your reputation. Judge Judy represents something our society desperately needs more of: uncompromising accountability. She doesn't care about your excuses, your social status, or how inconvenienced you feel. She cares about facts, evidence, and truth. In her courtroom, as in life, you can't smile your way past responsibility. You can't shrug off consequences. You can't rewrite history just because the truth is uncomfortable. Karen thought she was smarter than everyone in that room. She learned she wasn't even close. And that lesson, delivered with the force of a judge's gavel and witnessed by millions, serves as a reminder. The truth doesn't need multiple versions. It doesn't need rehearsals or adjustments. It simply is. If this story reminded you that actions have consequences and truth still matters, do me a favor, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss another moment of justice being served. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Drop a comment telling me about a time you witnessed someone get exactly what they deserved. And remember, whether you're in a courtroom or just living your daily life, integrity isn't about being under oath. It's about being the kind of person who tells the truth even when no one's watching, because eventually someone always is. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.